a seat. How are you guys doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. Quick introductions. I'm Adam Christopher. I'm a social studies teacher at Olathe South High School.
I'm Megan Ruport. I'm a social studies teacher at Olathe West.
And my name is Ron Keefover. I'm recently retired from the administrative office of the Kansas Supreme Court.
All right. So we're obviously on Unit 4 now. Oh, sorry. Would you guys please introduce yourself? I'm getting ahead of myself.
We are all seniors at Blue Valley Northwest. My name is Cole Cutler, and I'm undecided on which college I'll be going to.
My name is Luke Loyovic, and I plan on attending K-State.
My name is Jack Christie, and I will be attending DePaul University.
My name is Chris James. I'll be attending Kansas University.
My name is Jadni Manisha, and I'm waiting for acceptance from University of Washington. And we're under the direction of Mr. Christensen.
So, as I was saying, Unit 4, we're going to be on question 2 today. The question is, politics is rarely a struggle between good and evil. It's how we Americans try to make the country work better. It's a means of resolving our differences through dialogue and compromise rather than through ideological battle or pitched warfare. What is the role of the legislative branch in American constitutional government? How have the U.S. Congress and state legislatures promoted the protection of individual rights and the common good throughout American history? Are the U.S. Congress and state legislatures adequately fulfilling their role today? Why or why not?
Lee Hamilton was right in defining politics as an act of compromising. He was also correct in outlining what it should not be. Through compromise, better laws passed that satisfy both sides of the U.S.'s bipartisan system. Congress and state legislatures have been battling to find the balance between the common good of the country and individual liberty. With the increasing amount of government-sponsored federal and state welfare programs, Congress and state legislators promote the common good. However, Congress and state legislators have not been fulfilling those roles today.
Congress and state legislators have many responsibilities. Article 1 of the Constitution creates the legislative branch of the federal government. Their powers include the ability to initiate revenue bills, impeach federal officials, and elect the president in case of electoral college tie. Congress has many duties, including casework and communications. However, the main responsibility of Congress is to cater to the wants and the needs of the people. Because of the diversity of opinions in Congress, the members have to work together in committees to pass well-written laws that satisfy both sides. State legislators are elected officials who work for the lawmaking bodies of their state. They represent the people on a smaller scale compared to the congressmen. Both state legislators and Congress debate, vote on bills, and work in committees to achieve compromise.
The ideas of the common good and individual liberties conflict with each other at most times, but they can work together on some occasions. A case where state legislators promoted individual liberties and the common good is California's medical marijuana policies. In 1996, the state of California passed the Compassionate Use Act, which created a system of optional medical ID cards. This allowed citizens of California to legally use marijuana for medical reasons. This is beneficial to the common good because it keeps patients away from highly addictive opioids that are typically used for pain relief.
There have been times when state legislatures have promoted individual liberties over common good through concealed carry laws. 13 states have passed laws in which a permit is not needed to conceal a firearm. This is known as constitutional carry. For example, in Kansas, Governor Brownback signed the bill SB 45, which allows to carry a firearm without a concealed carry license issued by the state. This favors individual liberties over the common good because concealed carry is no longer as highly regulated in the state of Kansas. In a strictly common good society, no one would be able to own firearms, let alone carry them. The individual liberties of Kansans have greatly increased due to the lack of regulation around concealed carry. There have also been times when legislatures have decided to rule in favor of the common good over individual liberties of the people. The USA Patriot Act restricts the individual liberties by having more surveillance of the citizens. As with the restricting the rights of the people, it is beneficial for the common good because it makes the United States safer from potential terrorist attacks. Another example of this is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. This court is presented with cases that have to do with electronic surveillance and physical search for foreign intelligence purposes. After 9/11, the court started to approve collections of mass data. Also, since the creation of the court in 1978, all but one of the requests for surveillance was approved.
Congress and many state legislators are not fulfilling the role of compromise today because of practices such as gerrymandering and representing themselves as delegates rather than trustees. Redistricting states so that one party is an obvious advantage is detrimental to the representation of our country. This, along with most of the legislators representing through delegate representation, are creating a polar divide in Congress. This polar divide is creating problems in Congress concerning passing legislation. Representatives are following the views of the people they are representing rather than being pragmatic in Congress. The Congress members are not reaching across the aisle and creating compromise. The major gridlock that is seen both in the House of Representatives and state legislators can be attributed to gerrymandering and representatives acting like delegates. We are now open for questioning.
All right, so you guys talked about the need for compromise for the legislature to be able to fulfill its duties. You alluded to the fact that that's not always going to happen. But you mentioned the need to compromise so that we can end up with well-written laws that are coming out of committees. I'm curious to know your thoughts on whether or not the committee system that we have in Congress has been working.
I think the committee system that was traditionally in place when Congress was created, yes, worked, where you would have both sides or members from each party come together and work together to write legislation, where that way both sides were able to put out their opinions and what they wanted in the bill. That way when the bill was done, it was crafted, both parties really knew what was in the bill, and when it came to the floor, everyone knew what was going to be there. Now I would say that the legislature's actually started to break away from this tradition, where they're now doing single party committees or just trying to hide legislation from the other party as much as possible and just shoving it to the floor at the last minute, making additions or whatever. They're not following those traditions that they originally had in place.
An example of this is the recent tax bill reform that was produced in the Senate, where when they presented it to the floor of the Senate, there were Republicans writing in the margins and correcting the bill, and the Democrats were first shown the bill an hour before the voting, so they didn't really use the committee system that they should have been using.
You came up with some excellent examples of state legislatures passing legislation, enacting legislation for the good of the people, and or detriment, depending on your viewpoint, with concealed carry. But my question, what about in Kansas, what about school funding? Last several sessions there have been attempts to get a constitutional amendment that would remove the language in our Constitution that provides for suitable funding for education, that in effect get the courts out of our appropriation business. Talk about that a little bit. What do you think about that? Is that a good idea?
So I think, in my personal opinion, I think it's a bad idea if they remove this legislation, because one of the key parts of having a strong democracy is having a the people in the democracy have to know about the government, how to participate, and have to be well educated. And if they remove school funding, this will possibly be detrimental to the people knowing about our democracy.
And we've seen with Governor Brownback that he has been wanting to cut school funding throughout his time in office, and personally I disagree with that, and I think having those systems in place is definitely important to maintain education within the state of Kansas.
Okay, looking at one of your questions with question 2 is, are the federal and state legislatures adequately fulfilling their role today? How much do you think campaigning and the fact that House members have a 2-term limit, how much do you think that is impacting what's being done?
That is a very, I think, inefficient process. And if you had to look at the overall process of Congress and what it's supposed to be working through committees and such, I think the re-election process for senators and representatives is very ineffective, and the 2-year cycle leads to them acting more as puppets of the people, of people who are sectioned into unfair sections due to gerrymandering, and that leads to unfair representation in the Congress, and that leads to unfair law being passed. And so what would be more beneficial would be for longer term limits and allowing representatives to act pragmatically and pass law that is good for the whole country.
Yeah, adding on to that, I definitely see having such a short term length, and also when we're doing rotations, I definitely see that as a big issue, mainly because they're spending the majority of their time campaigning instead of actually getting stuff done, which is I see as a big problem, because it kind of ruins the whole point of why we have representatives for us. So I definitely see that as a problem. So I definitely want to have longer term lengths or term lengths, and also have term limits as well, which is another thing I think we should incorporate, because I'm not a fan of career politicians and that concept itself. Just because I don't think our government should be about that. I think it should be about having passionate people that want to represent their state, pass law that can actually benefit their people.
So a question for everyone, piggybacking off that. So if you feel there should be term limits, how many? What's reasonable?
I would say a fair cycle for the House of Representatives, because they're currently at 2 years. I think an extension, possibly to 4 to 6 years, probably 4 would be beneficial, and put maybe a 2 to 4 term limit on there. You want them to have time so that they can learn the processes of Congress, get comfortable in Congress, and be able to feel like they can have an impact on the legislation while they are in Congress, however, not have that be their entire career. For the Senate, I think the election cycle of every 6 years is probably adequate. However, placing a 2-term limit on that, I think, would be fair.
All right, you guys, you mentioned gerrymandering as one of the primary reasons for gridlock showing up in the legislature. I'm assuming what you're talking about is single-party dominance in those areas. But is there a need for regular redistricting? And if so, how do you prevent gerrymandering from happening?
Well, I do think there.
You guys.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I do believe that there is a need for redistricting every 10 years after the census, because there is population changes and people from different ideals and different political backgrounds move across the country. So I do think we do need that. And a solution for gerrymandering would be an independent commission, where you take the redistricting from the General Assembly to an independent commission, and the independent commission would consist of 5 people, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and 1 independent as the chair of the commission. And the people that get on the commission are nominated by district and circuit court justices in the area, and then they are later approved by the minority and majority leaders in the state legislature.
Interesting
Yeah.
idea. Guys, great job today. It's very obvious just in your candid responses there that you guys have done your research. That's typically one of the most impressive things that we see from groups that are well researched, is that they can think on their feet for those questions that you haven't necessarily had time to prepare for. I understand you guys have probably thought through what are the potential follow-up questions, and I just want to commend you on that. You guys did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
If I had to summarize my critique in 3 words, they would be, you nailed it. No, I'm very sincere about that. You did an excellent job. You had the attention to detail that I was looking for. You're probably the only team I've seen today that brought up good examples of state legislation that, such as medical marijuana in California and the others that you mentioned. So you did respond to both prongs of the question, federal and state, and a lot of the teams today unfortunately missed the and state part. But you guys were on the case, and you handled that. You're very responsive, good participation, very well spoken and articulate, and I commend you and the coach for the job.
I would agree with that, and one thing that stuck out to me is the fact that when you responded to the state legislation side of it, you didn't just focus on Kansas. I think that shows a lot as well. It's easy to, especially right now, to go to what's going on in Kansas, and you talked about that. I liked that it wasn't just about state funding, that you were able to pull out more than that, but the fact that you brought up California and other state legislation shows that you guys did way more research than just what you could find in a textbook or just hear by living in the state of Kansas. So overall, you guys did a fantastic job.
Thank you.